Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Nutrition Bites. I'm your host and Vitacost Registered Dietitian, Sam Kramer. Today we're going to be talking about the low FODMAP diet. Some of you have heard of this diet, and it might be new to some of you, so I'm excited to bring the explanation and the education and the research to you in order to detail what this diet actually means. So let's dive right into it. Low FODMAP is actually an acronym. So it stands for FODMAP, F-O-D as in dog, M-A-P, stands for fermentable oligosaccharide, disaccharide, monosaccharide, and polyols. So that's quite a mouthful, but let's break it down a little bit. So essentially when you hear the term saccharide, this means sugar. So we're talking about certain types of carbohydrates. Note that I'm not talking about all carbohydrates because carbohydrates are very important in terms of fueling your body for the necessary functions of everyday life, but these particular carbohydrates might be troublesome for some people. So what they are is that these oligo and disaccharide and monosaccharides and polyols are very short chain carbohydrates that can sometimes pass through the gut very quickly and not be fully digested. And when you don't have this full digestion, you may have some side effects such as cramping or bloating or gassing, so not fun for anyone. So what's interesting about the FODMAP diet is that the foods in the diet aren't particularly one nutrient or one food group. It's actually, it could be different foods across all the food groups, which does make it kind of challenging to really pinpoint what's triggering the issue. But a good key in order to facilitate this diet is to take out most of the foods within this high FODMAP classification and then slowly reintroduce these foods back into your diet to kind of pinpoint which trigger it is. So we've talked about what the diet is. Let's talk about what the levels are, or the threshold for low versus high FODMAP diet, and then we'll dive into what are actually the foods within the FODMAP content. So the threshold for FODMAPs unfortunately hasn't really been established. There's no formal definition to what low versus high FODMAP is. However, research has shown that there's general trends in the amount of FODMAPs that can be allowed in a particular meal or food that trigger symptoms. And this can be an example of 3 grams of fructose in excess of glucose or 0.2 grams of fructans in a normal meal. So you might be asking, okay, what's fructose, what's fructans? These are just science terms I don't understand. Well, that's where I come in, right? So let's dive into what the actual foods are that are considered low versus high FODMAP. So again, FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharide, disaccharide, monosaccharides, and polyols. So these are all classifications of the different short chain sugars. So for the oligosaccharides, we have the fructans and glucans, kind of the more unfamiliar carbohydrates. But these are typically the short chain carbohydrates in foods such as wheat, rye, barley, garlic, onions, tomatoes, things like this side over here. This can also occur in dried fruits, like you see the mango here, so that might be triggers for some people. For the disaccharides, this is lactose, which is milk sugar. So if you're not lactose intolerant, you might not have an issue with it with dairy products per se, but this could be an issue if you do have the FODMAP issue. And other sugars could be sucrose, which is table sugar, or those two. So with the dairy, though, you might want to include the yogurt because it does have the probiotics, which might help with the gut bacteria, helping with digestion health, which we talked about in a previous Nutrition Bites. So with the next classification of sugars, we have the monosaccharides. And this is fructose and glucose, so your basic simple sugars that can occur in certain fruits and vegetables. And again, not all fruits and vegetables, but certain ones that might be on the high FODMAP list. And last we have polyols, which isn't really in food substances per se, but this can occur in sugar-free mints and gum, all the sugar alcohols that might occur in foods, and other breath mints and gum and things like that can trigger the FODMAP issues. And so now that we've talked about what FODMAP is and what it's in and the levels, the last point that I want to touch on is gluten. And gluten has been a very, very popular diet to eliminate a gluten-free diet has been popular, and gluten has been kind of this trigger nutrient in different foods to remove from a diet. And what gluten is it's the protein in wheat, barley, and rye. So people who are gluten-free tend to either avoid these foods altogether or replace the gluten with gluten-free based grains such as amaranth or triticale. But research has shown that gluten insensitivity might not be the biggest issue. If you do have celiac disease, which is the inflammatory response to gluten, that's certainly an issue. But if you are gluten-free and aren't diagnosed with celiacs, you may want to check out the low versus high FODMAPs, because we mentioned with the oligosaccharides, it includes foods like wheat, rye, and barley, which also have gluten, but they also contain very high FODMAPs. So it might actually be that the gluten is masking the issue of actually having high FODMAPs, so reducing them may alleviate some symptoms. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Nutrition Bites, and make sure you check out FODMAP-friendly foods on Vitacost.com, as you see to my left. And until next time, this is your host and Vitacost Registered Dietitian, Sam Kramer, signing off.